Hello, welcome back to History Home Learning. Today I am going to attempt to teach you through video a new kind of exam question for the Whitechapel section of your paper. So in case you were unsure, this section that we're doing on Whitechapel and the Jack the Ripper bit, that is a different section to the rest of your crime and punishment paper. There are new types of questions and you need to use sources. Okay, so for the stuff we do on Anglo-Saxons and like 1800s, all of that, you don't need to look at the sources. So we are going to attempt to have a look at a new question and some sources on how to do this question. So it is 4 marks, so a short one, and it's basically like a form to fill out. So in the paper, it will be laid out, and there are 4 different parts to it. So basically, it's asking you to be a bit of a historian. It's asking you to follow up a source. Pretend you are working in the archives in the British Museum, and this really interesting source on immigration in Whitechapel comes up, and you want to find out more about it. So there are a whole host of other sources you can use to find out about this one. So you could look at police records. You could look at court records, you could look at eyewitness accounts, you could look at diaries from people who were there at the time. Loads of different things you could use to find out about history. So have a little think about the types of things you could do. Say you were starting a research project and you want to use sources from the time. Google is not a source. Internet is not a source. If you're writing something like, I would follow it up by Googling it, that is far too vague. Or I would follow it up by looking in a textbook. Okay, which textbook? Where was it published? Who wrote it? What time did they write it? All those different things. Okay, so really, really specific. Stick to sources from the time, like police records, like diary entries, like eyewitness accounts. Okay, that is my first bit of advice for that. So how it's set out is you'll be given a source and it says something like, how would you follow up source B to find out about tensions between immigrants in Whitechapel? Okay, I'm going to show you an example that I did in a minute. But the first section is always pick a detail in the source. Okay, so the detail I would follow up. So if it's a written source, that is going to be like a quote from the source. Or if it's a picture, it's going to be something specific in the picture. And then the next bit, you will need to write a question about the detail. Make sure it's linked. If you're saying, my detail is about Jewish immigrants, and then your question is about how often Irish immigrants found work, that's not related, so you can't get the mark for it. Okay? And then the third part of that is you need to pick a source you would use to help you answer that question. Okay, so say you've picked Jewish immigrants, your question is about how many Jewish immigrants there were in Whitechapel. A source you could use might be lodging house information kept between these specific years in Whitechapel, noting down the number of Jewish immigrants arriving. Really specific. And then the final part is you explaining how that source, those records of the lodging houses, going to help you answer the question from before. I know this sounds confusing. I'll show you an example in a minute and hopefully it'll become clear. So, you've picked your detail, you've asked a question, you've said the source, and then you need to explain how that source is going to help you. And that is it. A note on this as well. Just listen to the video, do your best. We know this is not ideal. I did not, under any circumstances, want to be teaching you a new exam question without me actually being there. So please do not panic. When we do come back to school, we are going to go over everything. Okay, so next clip is me showing you an example and off you go. Okay, so here is the example source we're going to use to try and answer this new type of question. So if we just have a look at the source first. So here we have a drawn picture, so it's a bit of art basically, of several men sat around the table having lunch or dinner. Looks quite a nice building actually. They look fairly well presented and clean. So let's read the little caption. So it says, an illustration published in the English Illustrated Magazine 1890. It shows Russian Jews at the Jews' temporary shelter in the East End of London. The shelter was set up for Jewish immigrants in 1886 to provide somewhere to stay and basic food while they looked for work. Okay, so let's go to our question. It is asking us, how would you follow up source B to find out more about the problems facing immigrants in the Whitechapel area? In your answer, you must give the question you would ask, the type of source you could use. Okay, so here is an example that I did for you. So if we have a look at the first bit, detail in the source I would follow up. Okay, be really specific here. A group of men sat around the table eating a meal. Yep, I know exactly where that is in the picture. I can see the group of men sat on the table eating the meal. If you had put the men, wouldn't count. It needs to be really specific. If you'd put the walls, the food, again, not specific enough. Group of men sat around the table eating a meal. Okay, the next one is a question I would ask. So you need to make it relevant to the question. This one. How would you follow up to find out more about the problems facing immigrants in Whitechapel? So the question I've gone for is, how many Russian Jews occupied the shelter in 1886 in the East End? Again, I've been specific. I've said 1886. I've said the East End. I've said Russian Jews. We know that this was basically a homeless shelter. They were out of work. So that's relevant to my question because it's saying the problems they faced. Now the next bit is the type of source I could use. Be specific. Do not just write like a diary. Do not just write records. So this is what I've written. Records of who occupied rooms at the Jews' temporary shelter during the year 1888 in the East End. Again, I've added where it is, I've added the name of the place and the year. And then to link to that, how might this help answer my question? So again, I've been really specific here. From the records kept, I could see how many entries there were in 1886, telling me the numbers living there. Sure, I'd even add in, and therefore, how many people were out of work and the problems they faced. Okay, try and link it back to the question as well. So, these four kind of little answers, they all need to be linked up together. Okay, if you've picked a thing from a detail from the picture, say you chose the food, and then you start asking about the men, you're going to lose 2 marks. It needs to be all linked up together. Again, if you're not specific enough in this source bit, if you've just said the records will tell me, not really good enough. We need to say the year, how they're going to tell us, what they're going to tell us, and this bit, how is that going to help? They're basically training you for future work as a historian here. So be inquisitive, make sure you know how to use these sources properly. Okay, so that's just one example, and hopefully that will explain it a little bit. But have a go. Remember, it's the first time we've ever done this, and I'm not there to teach you properly. So have a guess, have a go, and hopefully you'll be fine. You will be fine. So I hope that my rambling on in that example helped a little bit. Just give it a shot. First time you've ever done this, and I'm not here. Just have a guess, have a go. Remember, the source you're going to do is a written one though, so you will need to pick a quote from the source. Okay? Good luck. Send me a message if you're stuck. Send me anything to mark if you want me to as well.